In fact, there's no controversy. The majority of Congress likes what's happening. The majority of the Senate is supportive of Bitcoin. The majority of regulators in the White House are in support of Bitcoin. The majority of regulators everywhere in the world are supportive of Bitcoin. And if what you want to do is use it as digital property, there's not even any controversy for the controversy. And if you push hard enough, like they won't let me transfer it secretly without paying taxes on it, and I'm really angry about that, you can find some controversy. But in fact, this is such an obvious innovation in the economy that if people got away from the trollish fixation on finding someone to disagree with a hyperbolic statement I will make, they would realize that there's $100 trillion of money that needs to flow into this economy, and it's not there yet, and everybody is loudly endorsing it if you're listening. I think we could all agree that there's natural resistance to extraordinary disruptive change in the human civilization, and there always has been, right? Whether it's electricity or fire or explosives or internet technology or television or music. You know, these kids are listening to crazy stuff on records. There's always that. But if we take a snapshot 3 years ago versus today you have the CEO of Goldman Sachs, the CEO of JP Morgan. You just had Larry Fink yesterday saying this is an idea whose time has come. You've got this rippling effect through all the big money managers, all the hedge funds, all the bulge brackets. 2 years ago, Merrill Lynch didn't, when I started buying Bitcoin, I called Merrill Lynch. They're like, well, we can buy you some gold. We can't buy Bitcoin. We can't even talk about Bitcoin. We'll get fired. All 25,000 of our financial advisors will get fired for even talking about it. Now, those same people, they're sending me every week, crypto research. Fargo, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup. We're still in the stage of adoption where there is friction and there's prejudice and there is fear, right? There is. So I think we can all agree that there's still that, but the indicia, right? The indicia of institutional adoption and the likelihood that the institution and the establishment embrace this has never been clearer than it is today. Let's say it's going to be a 36-month, 24-month, 36-month, 48-month delay before banks catch up, but smaller banks are offering Bitcoin services. The larger banks, not yet, but Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, there are parts of those banks that are very reactionary and they push back. And on the other hand, another part of Morgan Stanley ends up owning $500 million worth of my stock, right? At the same time that the part of Morgan Stanley doesn't want anybody to buy your fund. And so these are not monolithic conglomerates, right? These tend to be massive organizations with 100 different divisions, each of them making independent decisions. And month by month, we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess. From 2022 to 2030, I think that's how long it takes for a lot of these major financial institutions to rewire their thinking and their plumbing and their risk controls. The good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin, and you would lose, the next 20x opportunity for you. So you almost don't want them to figure it out too fast, because otherwise you're the stupid money. I'd rather be the smart money and wait for the stupid money to learn over the course of 5 to 10 years, because we need someone to be buying this stuff when it hits $5 million a coin, Anthony. I think the sovereign wealth funds will come first. I mean, the first adoption will be any sovereign wealth fund like, UAE or Saudi Arabia or Norway or Switzerland that would hold big tech stocks. If you would hold $10 billion worth of Apple or Google or Facebook or Amazon, I think some of those will roll into Bitcoin because it's just another tech investment for them, and it's totally within their mandate. I think I think that some countries are being forced to consider other payment options. I mean, like the Russians are being forced. If you get kicked off of SWIFT, that drives and catalyzes something. And then I think, I think it'll be a while, but we're really waiting for a small, mid-sized company that has its own currency to print its currency and buy Bitcoin. I don't think it's a this year thing or a next year thing, but at some point somebody will figure it out. If you're selling $50 billion worth of commodities or exports every year, and you're using the dollar as your treasury reserve asset, you're propping up $100 trillion currency that's inflating at 10, 15, 20% a year. So that's just shipping. That's in essence shipping all of your treasury to the dollar over the course of a decade. If you switch that and you started buying CNY, you'd be propping up the Chinese currency. Instead of propping up $100 trillion currency, you'd be propping up a $20 or $30 trillion currency, and that's to the benefit of the Chinese. If you switch to gold, you would be propping up a $12 trillion currency. And if you switch to Bitcoin, you would be propping up a less than $1 trillion currency. So if people were rational, I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smarter than you, could you? Right? So I guess they're not really totally rational, but if you were rational, the obvious thing to do if you're an export country is you start exporting in Bitcoin, and then you sweep your cash flows into Bitcoin, and then you probably make like $500 billion or $1 trillion because you did that. If you're the first mover, who will do that? Well, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? By the way, why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid, and they have political constraints. They're afraid of their shareholders. The accounting makes it ugly. So, you wonder, why don't they just bend over and make $1 trillion? Remember when I tweeted to Elon, I said, I didn't say buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I said buy 10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then issue $10 billion of converts and buy 10 billion more, and you make 100 billion, and then all the S&P follows you and you make $1 trillion. Well, he didn't quite do that, right? I mean, he did a little bit. I'm okay with the $1.5 billion, but the point is, why doesn't someone do a $25 billion buy at Google? And the answer is because of politics and institutional inertia. And, some people don't want the trillion. Okay, so why doesn't a government do it? Politics, institutional inertia. When will they do it? Well, that this is the butterfly effect, right, guys? It's like, how do you predict when someone gets whacked on the side of the head and knocked out of their comfort zone and decides to go and bend over and pick up the $1 trillion? I don't know, right? Like, my real point is, any of 1,000 people could do it, and maybe none of them will do it. But if you're betting that not a single one of them wants the $1 trillion, I mean, it seems to me like over a decade, somebody wants the $1 trillion. I just don't know who will have the courage and the clarity of conviction to do it.